Hey you guys, I am Molly from Viva Vegan. This week we will be making pasta which is from Italy. Actually, I think it's from China originally, but we're going to be making an Italian type pasta. So I know this can be a little intimidating for some of you to make if you've never done it before. It is so easy. It has 4 ingredients in it and it's so user friendly. I'm really going to break it down so that you don't feel intimidated to make this. Please follow along. And I can't wait for you guys to try this. It is so easy to make. Okay, so for my pasta dough, I'm gonna start off with my flour. In here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour and 1 cup of semolina flour. I really like the semolina because it gives the pasta a little bit more of a bite. I like a real al dente pasta. So I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio. Again, that's 2 parts all-purpose flour to 1 part semolina flour. And I'm just going to dump this right here on my cutting board. And I'm going to make a well in this where I'm going to add my liquids. So this is a vegan pasta, meaning we are not using egg in it. So I'm just going to make a little well, so it should look like a little volcano. And I'm also just going to sprinkle in a little salt to taste, and that's all going to get worked in as we start kneading this. So on my surface I have a little bit more flour for dusting as I continue to knead. I have my olive oil. Typically it's about 1 teaspoon per cup, so I have about 3 teaspoons of olive oil here, and I have some filtered water that I'm going to add as needed. And we'll continue to knead the dough and see if we need to add more liquid or more flour based on the elasticity of this. So I have my well here. I've sprinkled my I've sprinkled my salt over my flour, and I'm going to add my olive oil in here. And I'm going to start off with about half a cup of water, and we're just going to take our fingers. I'm working with gloves because unfortunately I cut myself this morning and I don't want to contaminate the dough. I'm going to remove my ring. Make sure you remove any jewelry. You don't want pasta dough stuck in between all of your jewelry. So I'm just going to take my fingers and I'm going to start working this in. Oh. A little messy here, that's okay. You could do this in a bowl if you'd like, and then turn it out onto the cutting board. So once your dough has come together, I would set a timer for about 10 minutes and we'll check in and see how your dough is doing. But what we want to do is we really want to work the gluten in that dough. It needs to fully develop, otherwise you're going to end up with a really tough pasta when you bite into it. So that gluten really needs to be worked. Again, set your timer for 10 minutes and we'll check back in and see how it's doing. And the way I knead my dough is I fold the top down with the palm of my hand or the heel of my hand. I'm going to push it forward, do a half turn, quarter turn, take the top, fold it down, push it in with the heel of my hand, quarter turn, pull the top down, push it in with the heel of my hand, quarter turn, top down, heel of my hand, push. Quarter turn, top down, heel of my hand, push, and we're just going to continue that. If your dough is sticking to your cutting board or your surface that you're working on, go ahead and dust it with a little bit of flour. You can also dust your dough with a little bit of flour. That's if you've added a little too much liquid, go ahead and add a little bit of flour. If your dough didn't come together, add a little bit more liquid, but it should. You can see mine's not sticking at all to my surface, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, so I've been kneading mine for about 10 minutes. You'll know it's done. It should feel soft. However, as you're kneading it, you'll start to feel more and more resistance. That's because that gluten has fully developed and it's getting really tight in there. So that's how you'll know it's done. So it should be soft and you should start feeling a good amount of resistance as you're pushing it with your knead. So at that point, you should be good to go. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cover this in plastic wrap and we're going to put it in the refrigerator for a minimum of 30 minutes. You could do this the day before and let it sit overnight. If we were to try to roll this out right now, the gluten is so tight in there, you're gonna get a lot of resistance as you roll, and it's just gonna end up shrinking back to the size that it started with or something close to that. So I'm gonna put it in plastic wrap, put it in my refrigerator for a minimum of 30 minutes, and then we'll check back. Okay, so my pasta dough has been sitting in the refrigerator for a minimum of 30 minutes. So the next step is to start rolling it out and shaping it as we like. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut this into manageable sizes to work with. I'm not gonna try and attack this whole dough all at once. So I'm gonna cut this into 4. I'm just gonna use 1/4 at a time and set the rest to the side. I'm gonna keep it covered in plastic wrap so that it doesn't get a film on the outside, and so it's easy to work with. So what do I have here? I have my knife, I have a rolling pin, I have my pasta machine, and I have some flour for dusting. So I'm gonna set my pasta machine to the side. We need to get this rolled out to a thin enough size so that it can start rolling through the machine. So I'm gonna take a little bit of all-purpose flour and just dust it on my cutting board and a little bit on top. And what I'm gonna do here is I don't really wanna work with a triangular shape, so I'm going to try and shape it a little bit into kind of like a rectangle here. Take my ring off. And now I'm gonna start rolling. So again, we need this thin enough to where it's gonna start going through the pasta machine. And if your dough starts to stick a little bit, don't be afraid to add a little bit more flour for dusting. Okay, so that should work. You can see that. So I'm gonna start off on the widest setting of my pasta machine. So for me, this is number 7. And I'm gonna bring this to the edge of my counter so the handle is not hitting. And we're just gonna roll it through. I like to roll it through the widest setting twice before I start moving down. So now from 7, I'm gonna stay there, do that one more time. At this point, I'm gonna add a little bit more flour because as it starts to stretch out, it might start getting a little sticky, and the last thing I want is it for it to start sticking together, and then it's just not fun for anyone. So that was 4, now I'm on 3. And depending on what kind of pasta you're making, like if I was doing ravioli, I might want to keep it at a 3 right here. This is pretty thin. If you think of a ravioli, it has a filling that it needs to hold in, and you don't want the pasta to break and the filling spill out as it's cooking. So if I was doing ravioli, I'd probably stop right here. I'm going to be doing more of a spaghetti. So I'm going to go down to 2. So I have a nice thin pasta sheet right here. So again, this was rolled down to 2 on my pasta maker. And I'm gonna start cutting this into equal sizes. So again, for me, I'm doing a spaghetti for this. You could do like a fettuccine, a linguine, you can hand cut it. You could do ravioli. If you were doing ravioli, I'd probably keep it at a 3 though instead of a 2. But for me, I'm doing spaghetti, so I want this to be equal. So I'm gonna take my first sheet, I think that's about a good length for spaghetti, and I'm gonna cut it there, and I'm going to take the rest of my sheets, measure it next to that so they're uniform in length. And again, pasta really isn't that difficult. A lot of people are intimidated to make it, but it tastes so much better than dried pasta if you just have a little bit of extra time to make it. I mean, and how simple are these ingredients? It's literally just water, flour, salt, and oil. Okay, so my last one's a little bit longer. I'm not so worried about that though. And then we are going to run it through on our setting. So at this point is when I'll add my attachment. Okay, so now that all of these have been cut into equal sizes, equal lengths, I'm going to work with my attachment on my pasta maker to cut it to size. What I have on the side here is a sheet pan with a dish towel, a clean dish towel on top with some semolina flour dusted on the top. So I'm going to take my first pasta sheet here and roll it through to cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little extra semolina flour and dust it. The last thing we want is for our pasta to stick together and you have one clump in your pot of water. So I'm just dusting this. And then I'm going to set this on my dish towel. If any of these are, especially with this is a pretty thin cut, are sticking together, just kind of help them and pull them apart. If you feel your dough getting a little sticky before you roll it, just dust it with a little bit of flour. Nests on my sheet pan, so I'm just going to continue rolling this dough out and shaping it as I see fit, and we're just going to leave it on here until we're ready to cook it, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week on Viva Vegan. Again, I am Molly Hernandez. I would love to hear what you thought of this recipe. If you were able to do it, if you were not able to do it, I think that half of the video I had flour stuck to my forehead, so hopefully that's not in there. Anyway, please send me a recipe request for a dish that you would like me to turn into a vegan dish. I would love to hear what you thought of this dish, and I will see you guys next week.